"Excuse me, are you lost, dear? The pharmacy is down the hall." Dr. Lena Hansen, a brilliant cardiac surgeon, froze. A condescending smile plastered on Mrs. Eleanor Ainsworth's face, a prominent hospital board member, sent a chill down Lena's spine. This wasn't the first time Lena had faced such veiled prejudice in the sterile halls of St. Jude's Hospital, but today something snapped. Today, Lena wasn't just going to swallow the insult. Today, she was going to make them see. What unfolded next wasn't just a confrontation. It was a domino effect, a chain of events that would expose hidden biases, shatter reputations, and ultimately blur the lines between professional decorum and personal vendetta. This is the story of a woman who refused to be defined by her appearance, a story where a Harvard degree became more than just a piece of paper, and where the scales of justice tipped in the most unexpected and dramatic ways. Stay tuned, because you won't believe what happened next. The fluorescent lights of St. Jude's Hospital seemed to hum with an almost judgmental intensity as Dr. Lena Hansen made her way to the preoperative briefing room. Her mind was laser-focused on the complex aortic valve replacement scheduled for her next patient, a beloved local teacher named Mr. Walter Jenkins. Years of rigorous training, countless sleepless nights, and the unwavering dedication that had propelled her through Harvard Medical School and a demanding residency had molded Lena into one of the most promising cardiac surgeons in the state. Yet despite her accomplishments, a subtle undercurrent of skepticism often followed her, a shadow cast by the color of her skin in the predominantly white, male-dominated field of cardiac surgery. Today, however, the undercurrent surged into a blatant wave of disrespect. As Lena reached the entrance of the briefing room, she was intercepted by Mrs. Eleanor Ainsworth, a woman whose name carried considerable weight within the hospital's administrative circles, not least because her late husband, Mr. Charles Ainsworth, had been a major benefactor. Mrs. Ainsworth, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit and radiating an air of effortless authority, blocked Lena's path. "Excuse me." Mrs. Ainsworth began, her tone laced with a saccharine sweetness that Lena had learned to recognize as a precursor to something unpleasant. "Are you lost, dear? The pharmacy is down the hall. I believe one of the nurses needed some supplies." Lena's breath caught in her throat. The casual dismissal, the implicit assumption that she couldn't possibly be a surgeon, stung with a familiar sharpness. She stood tall, her gaze steady, despite the rising tide of anger within her. "Good morning, Mrs. Ainsworth. I'm Dr. Hansen. I believe I'm scheduled to present the surgical plan for Mr. Jenkins." A flicker of surprise, quickly masked by a look of disbelief, crossed Mrs. Ainsworth's face. "A doctor? You don't look like a doctor." She said the words hanging in the air like a tangible insult. The other staff members milling nearby, a mix of residence nurses and a senior anesthesiologist named Dr. Robert Davies, seemed to freeze their conversations, abruptly ceasing. The silence was thick with unspoken discomfort. Lena felt a flush creep up her neck, but she refused to let the woman see her falter. "With all due respect, Mrs. Ainsworth," Lena replied, her voice calm but firm, "I assure you that I am perfectly capable of both finding the pharmacy and performing complex cardiac surgery. Now, if you'll excuse me, my team is waiting." She attempted to step past Mrs. Ainsworth, but the older woman placed a hand on her arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Hold on a moment, Doctor," she said, the title dripping with skepticism. "Surely there must be some mistake." "Doctor, Michael Thompson is leading Mr. Jenkins's surgery, isn't he?" "Dr. Thompson is assisting me," Lena corrected her, her patience wearing thin. "I am the lead surgeon on this case." Mrs. Ainsworth's eyes narrowed. You're so young, and, Well, she trailed off the unspoken words, and black, hanging heavy in the air. That was it. The years of subtle snubs, the constant need to prove herself twice as hard as her white male colleagues, the weariness of battling ingrained prejudice, all coalesced in that moment. Lena reached into her briefcase, her fingers closing around the crisp, heavy paper she always carried with her. Her medical degree from Harvard University. It wasn't a habit to flaunt it, but today felt different. Today she needed to make a statement, not just for herself, but for every other person who had ever been judged based on appearance rather than merit. With a deliberate motion, Lena withdrew the framed document. The prestigious Harvard seal gleamed under the harsh fluorescent light. She held it out for Mrs. Ainsworth to see the silence in the hallway, now absolute. "Perhaps this will clarify things, Mrs. Ainsworth," Lena said, her voice steady and resonant. This piece of paper, earned through years of dedication and hard work, confirms that I am indeed a doctor. A cardiac surgeon, to be precise. And I assure you, my abilities extend far beyond locating the pharmacy. Mrs. Ainsworth stared at the degree, her face paling slightly. The smug certainty that had defined her demeanor just moments ago began to crumble, replaced by a dawning realization of her egregious error. Dr. Davies, the anesthesiologist, cleared his throat, uncomfortably avoiding eye contact. A young resident, Dr. Emily Carter, who had always admired Lena's skill and composure, offered a small, supportive nod. The power dynamic in the hallway had shifted. The subtle assumptions of inferiority had been challenged not with anger or aggression, but with the undeniable proof of Lena's accomplishments. Mrs. Ainsworth, for the first time, seemed at a loss for words. I apologize," she stammered, her voice lacking its earlier conviction. There must have been a misunderstanding." "Indeed," Lena replied, her gaze unwavering. "The misunderstanding is that competence and expertise have no singular appearance." With that, she stepped past Mrs. Ainsworth and entered the briefing room, leaving the older woman standing in the hallway, the weight of her prejudice hanging heavy in the stunned silence. The briefing proceeded as scheduled, Lena presenting the complex surgical plan with her usual clarity and precision, the earlier uncomfortable encounter casting a long, unspoken shadow over the proceedings. The incident in the hallway did not remain confined to those who witnessed it firsthand. Within hours, the story had spread like wildfire throughout St. Jude's Hospital, morphing and evolving with each retelling. Some versions painted Lena as an aggressive upstart, flaunting her credentials. Others portrayed Mrs. Ainsworth as a harmless, albeit slightly misguided elderly woman. But the underlying truth, the blatant racial bias displayed by a prominent figure, resonated deeply with many, particularly the minority staff members who had experienced similar microaggressions throughout their careers. Dr. Davies, the senior anesthesiologist who had been present, felt a pang of guilt for his silence. He had witnessed the exchange, recognized the injustice, but had chosen to remain neutral, a passive bystander. Later that day, he sought out Lena in the doctor's lounge. "Dr. Hansen," he began, his tone apologetic. "I wanted to say, I was there this morning. I heard what happened with Mrs. Ainsworth. It was inappropriate." Lena looked up from her notes, her expression neutral. "Thank you, Dr. Davies. I appreciate you saying that. I should have said something then," he admitted, his gaze dropping slightly. "But honestly, Mrs. Ainsworth, she has a lot of influence here. People are afraid to cross her." "That's precisely the problem, isn't it?" Lena replied, her voice quiet but firm. "That fear allows prejudice to persist unchecked." Meanwhile, Mrs. Ainsworth, shaken by the encounter and the subsequent whispers that followed her through the hospital corridors sought refuge in the office of Mr. Edward Sterling, the hospital's chief administrator and a long-time friend of her late husband. She presented her version of events, carefully omitting the explicitly biased nature of her remarks, and painting herself as simply concerned about the qualifications of a young-looking individual. "Edward, it was all a misunderstanding," she insisted, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. "This young woman, Dr. Hanson, she just seemed so young to be leading such a critical surgery. I merely inquired if there hadn't been some sort of mix-up with Dr. Thompson." Mr. Sterling, a man known for his cautious nature and his deference to the hospital's major donors, listened attentively, his brow furrowed. The Ainsworth family's financial contributions to St. Jude's were substantial, and he was loath to alienate Mrs. Ainsworth. "Eleanor, I understand your concern," he said soothingly. "But Dr. Hanson is an exceptionally talented surgeon. Her credentials are impeccable. She graduated at the top of her class at Harvard and completed a highly competitive residency program. Dr. Thompson is indeed assisting her as she is the lead on this case. But she was so abrupt." Mrs. Ainsworth countered her voice, regaining some of its earlier indignation. "And then she practically shoved her degree in my face. It was quite unprofessional." Mr. Sterling sighed inwardly. He knew Eleanor's tendency towards entitlement and her thinly veiled biases. He also knew Lena's reputation as a skilled and dedicated physician. He found himself in an uncomfortable position, caught between appeasing a powerful donor and acknowledging the unprofessional behavior of one of his staff members. "I will have a word with Dr. Hanson about maintaining professional decorum," he said, finally choosing the path of least resistance. "But I assure you, Mr. Jenkins is in excellent hands." True to his word, Mr. Sterling later called Lena to his office. He began by acknowledging her skills and contributions to the hospital, but then delicately broached the subject of her interaction with Mrs. Ainsworth. "Dr. Hanson," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "I understand there was an incident this morning with Mrs. Ainsworth. While I have no doubt about your qualifications, it's important to maintain a respectful and professional demeanor in all our interactions, especially with our patients' families and our benefactors." Lena listened patiently, her expression betraying none of the resentment she felt. "Mr. Sterling," she replied calmly, "I was respectful to Mrs. Ainsworth. Her initial comments, however, were not respectful to me. I was simply stating my credentials in response to her implication that I was not a doctor. I believe it was her assumptions based on my appearance that were unprofessional." Mr. Sterling shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He knew Lena was right, but he couldn't bring himself to directly acknowledge Mrs. Ainsworth's prejudice. "I understand your perspective, Dr. Hanson. However, moving forward, perhaps we can all strive for clearer communication and avoid misunderstandings." Lena nodded curtly. She knew that Mr. Sterling's priority was to smooth things over to protect the hospital's image and its financial interests. She didn't expect him to take a strong stance against Mrs. Ainsworth's behavior, but she also knew that she wouldn't stand by silently if she faced similar prejudice in the future. The incident had solidified her resolve. She wouldn't let anyone diminish her accomplishments or question her capabilities based on the color of her skin. Her Harvard degree wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a testament to her resilience, her intelligence, and her unwavering commitment to her profession. And she wouldn't hesitate to use it again, if necessary. The preoperative briefing for Mr. Jenkins's surgery proceeded smoothly, albeit with a palpable tension in the room. Lena, focused and professional, outlined the intricate details of the procedure, answering questions with precision and expertise. "Doctor," Thompson, a seasoned surgeon known for his quiet competence, offered his support and insights. The nurses, led by the experienced charge nurse, Ms. Patricia Evans, prepared the instruments and equipment with meticulous care. Mr. Jenkins's surgery was a success, a testament to Lena's skill and the collaborative efforts of the entire surgical team. As he recovered in the intensive care unit, his family expressed their deep gratitude to Dr. Hansen, praising her clear explanations and her compassionate care. Their positive feedback relayed through hospital channels subtly undermined Mrs. Ainsworth's earlier insinuations about Lena's competence. Meanwhile, the story of the hallway encounter continued to circulate, reaching the ears of other minority staff members. A black nurse in the oncology department, Ms. Sharon Davis, had experienced her own share of condescending remarks and assumptions. She approached Lena one afternoon in the cafeteria. "Dr. Hansen," she said quietly, "I just wanted to say, I heard what happened with Mrs. Ainsworth. Thank you. Thank you for standing up for yourself. It's something many of us have wanted to do for a long time." Lena nodded, a sense of shared understanding passing between them. "It's not easy, Ms. Davis, but we can't let these things go unchallenged." Their conversation sparked further discussions among the minority staff, creating an informal network of support and solidarity. They shared their experiences, their frustrations, and their hopes for a more equitable and inclusive work environment. The incident with Mrs. Ainsworth, though unpleasant, had inadvertently created a sense of unity among those who had previously felt isolated in their struggles against prejudice. Unbeknownst to Lena, her actions had also caught the attention of Dr. Michael Thompson. He had always admired Lena's surgical skills and her dedication to her patients. He had also witnessed firsthand the subtle biases she often faced. Mrs. Ainsworth's blatant disrespect had particularly rankled him. He believed in meritocracy and was deeply disturbed by the idea that someone's appearance could overshadow their qualifications. One afternoon, Dr. Thompson approached Lena in her office. "Lena," he said, his tone serious, "I wanted to talk to you about what happened with Mrs. Ainsworth. I was in the briefing room. Her comments were completely out of line." Lena looked up, surprised by his directness. "Thank you, Michael. It wasn't pleasant. I've been here a long time," Dr. Thompson continued, "and I've seen this kind of thing happen before. Subtle sometimes, not so subtle. It's not right. You're one of the best surgeons we have, and you shouldn't have to deal with that kind of garbage." He paused for a moment, then added, "I'm on the medical board. While Mrs. Ainsworth isn't a member, her opinions carry weight. If you decide to file a formal complaint, I want you to know that you'll have my support." Lena was genuinely touched by his offer. Dr. Thompson was a respected figure in the hospital, and his backing would carry significant weight. "Thank you, Michael," she said sincerely. "That means a lot to me." She hadn't yet decided whether to file a formal complaint. She knew it would be a difficult and potentially contentious process. But knowing that she had the support of colleagues like Dr. Thompson and the quiet solidarity of other minority staff members gave her a sense of strength and determination. Meanwhile, Mrs. Ainsworth, oblivious to the growing undercurrent of support for Lena, continued to voice her concerns about the young surgeon to anyone who would listen. She portrayed Lena as arrogant and unprofessional, exaggerating the incident in the hallway, and conveniently omitting her own biased remarks. Her complaints eventually reached the ears of Mrs. Carol Henderson, another influential member of the hospital board, and a woman known for her strong sense of fairness and her sharp intellect. Mrs. Henderson had heard whispers about the encounter and was troubled by Mrs. Ainsworth's account, which seemed inconsistent with the Lena Hansen she had briefly met at a hospital fundraising event, a poised and articulate young woman who had spoken passionately about her work. Mrs. Henderson decided to investigate further. She discreetly spoke to Dr. Davies and Dr. Carter, both of whom provided more accurate accounts of the incident, confirming Mrs. Ainsworth's condescending remarks and Lena's calm but firm response. Armed with this information, Mrs. Henderson arranged a meeting with Mr. Sterling. "Edward," she began, her tone serious, "I've heard some disturbing reports about an interaction between Eleanor Ainsworth and Dr. Hanson. Eleanor's version of events seems selective." Mr. Sterling sighed, bracing himself for a difficult conversation. He recounted his meeting with Mrs. Ainsworth and his subsequent conversation with Lena, carefully avoiding any direct condemnation of Mrs. Ainsworth's behavior. Mrs. Henderson listened intently, her expression growing increasingly concerned. "Edward," she said finally, "we cannot allow prejudice to influence how we treat our staff. Dr. Hanson is a valuable asset to this hospital. Her skills and her dedication are beyond question. Eleanor's behavior was unacceptable, and we need to address it." Mr. Sterling, sensing the firmness in Mrs. Henderson's voice and knowing her reputation for integrity, realized he could no longer avoid confronting the issue directly. The ripple effect of Mrs. Ainsworth's words was spreading further than she could have imagined, creating unexpected alliances and forcing a long overdue reckoning with the underlying biases within the hospital. As Mrs. Henderson delved deeper into the incident involving Lena and Mrs. Ainsworth, she began to uncover a pattern of similar, albeit less blatant, complaints and observations regarding Mrs. Ainsworth's interactions with minority staff members over the years. A former black nurse's aide recalled being repeatedly mistaken for a member of the housekeeping staff. A Hispanic physician in the emergency department remembered Mrs. Ainsworth questioning his medical advice with an unusual degree of skepticism. Individually, these incidents might have seemed minor or easily dismissed, but collectively they painted a disturbing picture of ingrained prejudice. Mrs. Henderson shared her findings with Mr. Sterling, emphasizing the potential legal and reputational risks to the hospital if these issues were not addressed. Mr. Sterling, finally recognizing the gravity of the situation, agreed that a more formal review was necessary. He discreetly initiated an internal inquiry, tasking a senior member of the Human Resources Department, Ms. Olivia Blackwood, with gathering information and speaking with staff members who had interacted with Mrs. Ainsworth. Ms. Blackwood's investigation corroborated the emerging pattern. Several minority employees recounted instances where Mrs. Ainsworth had made assumptions about their roles, questioned their competence based on their appearance, or treated them with a subtle but palpable condescension. While none of these incidents had been formally reported at the time due to fear of retaliation or a belief that their concerns would be dismissed, the consistency of the accounts was deeply troubling. Meanwhile, Mrs. Ainsworth, sensing a shift in the hospital's atmosphere and noticing the cooler reception she was receiving from some staff members, became increasingly agitated. She confided in her close friend, Mrs. Beatrice Campbell, another prominent figure in local society and a frequent visitor to the hospital. "Beatrice, I don't understand what's happening," she complained over afternoon tea. "That young Dr. Hanson is making trouble. She's portraying me as some sort of racist. It's outrageous. I simply had a harmless concern about her age and experience." Mrs. Campbell, a shrewd and observant woman, listened patiently, a thoughtful expression on her face. She had always suspected that Eleanor harbored certain biases, though she had never openly confronted her about them. Now, however, the situation seemed to be escalating. "Eleanor," Mrs. Campbell said gently, "perhaps you should consider how your words might have been perceived. Sometimes, even unintentional remarks can have a hurtful impact." Mrs. Ainsworth bristled. "But I didn't mean anything by it. I was just surprised." She doesn't fit the image of a typical surgeon." Mrs. Campbell sighed inwardly. Eleanor's denial was deeply ingrained. "Perhaps," she said carefully, "the image of a surgeon is changing, Eleanor, and perhaps it's time we all adjusted our perceptions." The internal inquiry culminated in a confidential report presented to Mr. Sterling and Mrs. Henderson. The report detailed the findings of Ms. Blackwood's investigation, highlighting the recurring themes of biased assumptions and microaggressions in Mrs. Ainsworth's interactions with minority staff. While the report acknowledged that there was no direct evidence of overt discriminatory actions, it concluded that Mrs. Ainsworth's behavior had created a hostile and uncomfortable environment for some employees. Faced with this evidence, Mr. Sterling knew that he had to take action. He arranged a private meeting with Mrs. Ainsworth, a meeting he approached with a mixture of apprehension and determination. "Eleanor," he began, his tone somber, "we've received some concerning reports about your interactions with certain members of our staff." Mrs. Ainsworth's eyes widened in indignation. "Reports from whom?" "That Dr. Hanson. I presume this is an outrage." "The reports come from multiple individuals," Mr. Sterling countered, his voice firm, "and they suggest a pattern of behavior that is unacceptable in our hospital. Assumptions based on appearance, questioning of competence based on race or ethnicity. This is not the environment we strive to create." Mrs. Ainsworth vehemently denied the allegations, portraying herself as the victim of a malicious smear campaign orchestrated by Dr. Hanson. However, Mr. Sterling stood his ground, outlining the findings of the internal inquiry and emphasizing the hospital's commitment to equality and respect for all staff members. "Eleanor," he said finally, "your contributions to this hospital have been invaluable, and we are deeply grateful for your generosity over the years. However, we cannot condone behavior that undermines our values and creates a hostile environment for our employees. I believe it would be in everyone's best interest if you were to take a step back from your active involvement in the hospital's affairs for a period of time." Mrs. Ainsworth was stunned. The implication that she should resign from the hospital board, even temporarily, was a devastating blow to her sense of prestige and influence. She argued, she pleaded, she even threatened to withdraw her family's financial support, but Mr. Sterling remained firm. He explained that the integrity and reputation of the hospital were paramount. Ultimately, Mrs. Ainsworth, realizing that her position was untenable, reluctantly agreed to a temporary leave of absence from the hospital board. The decision, though made privately, soon leaked within the hospital community, sending a clear message that prejudiced behavior, regardless of the perpetrator's status, would not be tolerated. The unveiling of Mrs. Ainsworth's past patterns had far-reaching consequences, not only for her own reputation, but also for the broader culture within St. Jude's Hospital. News of Mrs. Ainsworth's temporary leave from the hospital board spread rapidly, met with a mixture of surprise and quiet satisfaction among the staff, particularly the minority employees who had long felt marginalized. Lena herself was surprised by the swiftness and severity of the repercussions. While she hadn't filed a formal complaint, the support she had received from colleagues and the internal inquiry initiated by Mrs. Henderson had clearly made a significant impact. The atmosphere within St. Jude's began to shift. There was a renewed emphasis on diversity and inclusion, with mandatory sensitivity training sessions announced for all staff members. The hospital administration, under Mr. Sterling's direction, pledged to create a more equitable and respectful work environment. Meanwhile, Mr. Jenkins continued his recovery, making steady progress under Lena's care. His family remained deeply appreciative of her skill and compassion, often stopping her in the hallways to express their gratitude. Their positive experiences served as a powerful counter-narrative to Mrs. Ainsworth's earlier insinuations about Lena's competence. One afternoon, Lena received an unexpected visitor in her office. It was Mrs. Beatrice Campbell, Mrs. Ainsworth's close friend. Lena was surprised, but greeted her politely. "Dr. Hanson." Mrs. Campbell began, her expression serious but not unfriendly. "I wanted to speak with you about Eleanor." Lena listened quietly as Mrs. Campbell expressed her concern for her friend, acknowledging that Eleanor had made a mistake and had likely caused offense. She also revealed a detail that Lena had not been aware of. Mrs. Ainsworth had a long history of underlying anxiety and insecurity, often masked by her outward displays of confidence and authority. Eleanor's husband, Charles, was a very dominant figure, Mrs. Campbell explained. Since his passing, she's struggled to find her place and her sense of worth. "I'm not excusing her behavior, Dr. Hanson, but I wanted you to understand that it may stem from more than just prejudice." Lena considered this information. It didn't excuse Mrs. Ainsworth's words or the impact they had, but it offered a different perspective, a glimpse into the insecurities that might have fueled her bias. Mrs. Campbell then surprised Lena further by expressing her admiration for how Lena had handled the situation. "You responded with grace and professionalism, Dr. Hanson," she said sincerely. "You stood your ground without resorting to anger or aggression. I admire that." She also shared that she had encouraged Mrs. Ainsworth to reflect on her actions and to consider seeking professional help to address her underlying issues. As the weeks passed, Mrs. Ainsworth remained out of the public eye. Her absence from the hospital board meetings was noticeable. Lena focused on her work, her days filled with surgeries, patient consultations, and research. The incident with Mrs. Ainsworth, while not forgotten, began to fade into the background as life at St. Jude's moved forward. Then came the unexpected twist. One morning, Lena was reviewing the schedule for the upcoming week when she noticed a familiar name. Mrs. Eleanor Ainsworth was listed as a patient for a cardiology consultation. The referring physician was Dr. David Miller, a respected cardiologist at St. Jude's. The reason for the consultation was listed as atrial fibrillation, new onset. Lena felt a complex mix of emotions. Surprise, certainly, but also a sense of professional detachment. Mrs. Ainsworth was now simply a patient in need of medical care. Her past behavior, while hurtful and inappropriate, was irrelevant to her current medical needs. When Mrs. Ainsworth arrived for her appointment, she looked frail and noticeably subdued. She seemed surprised to see Lena, but maintained a polite, if somewhat distant, demeanor. Lena in turn treated Mrs. Ainsworth with the same professionalism and thoroughness she extended to all her patients. She reviewed her medical history, conducted a careful examination, and explained the diagnosis and treatment options clearly and compassionately. During the consultation, Mrs. Ainsworth made no mention of their previous encounter. She listened attentively to Lena's explanations, asked pertinent questions, and thanked her politely at the end of the appointment. As Mrs. Ainsworth left her office, Lena couldn't help but reflect on the unexpected turn of events. The woman who had questioned her credentials and judged her based on her appearance was now entrusting her with her medical care. It was a stark and ironic twist, a moment where the scales of justice seemed to balance in a way no one could have predicted. Lena knew that providing excellent care to Mrs. Ainsworth was not about seeking revenge or proving a point. It was simply about upholding her commitment to her profession, to treating every patient with the respect and expertise they deserved, regardless of their background or past behavior. The encounter served as a powerful reminder that life is often unpredictable and that the roles we play can shift in unexpected ways. The doctor who had been judged was now the healer. The woman who had wielded her social power was now vulnerable and seeking help. In the sterile environment of the examination room, the superficial barriers of prejudice and social status seemed to dissolve, leaving only the fundamental human need for care and compassion. The story of Dr. Lena Hansen and Mrs. Eleanor Ainsworth resonated deeply within the community and beyond. While the initial incident sparked outrage and debate the subsequent events, the internal inquiry, Mrs. Ainsworth's temporary leave, and the unexpected doctor-patient relationship offered a nuanced and thought-provoking narrative about prejudice, accountability, and the potential for unexpected reconciliation. Within St. Jude's Hospital, the atmosphere continued to evolve. The sensitivity training sessions were well attended, prompting honest conversations and a greater awareness of unconscious biases. The hospital administration implemented new policies and procedures aimed at promoting diversity and inclusion at all levels. While deeply ingrained prejudices wouldn't disappear overnight, there was a tangible sense of progress, a commitment to creating a more equitable and respectful environment for both staff and patients. Dr. Michael Thompson continued to be a vocal advocate for fairness and equality within the medical board. He championed initiatives to support minority physicians and to address any instances of bias or discrimination that arose. His unwavering support for Lena had solidified their professional relationship and fostered a deeper sense of trust between them. Ms. Sharon Davis and the informal network of minority staff members continued to meet, providing each other with support and advocating for positive change within the hospital. Their collective voice grew stronger, and their experiences began to be heard and acknowledged by the wider hospital community. Mr. Walter Jenkins made a full recovery and often spoke publicly about the exceptional care he had received from Dr. Hansen. His positive testimonials further eroded any lingering doubts about Lena's competence and skill. As for Mrs. Ainsworth, her experience as Lena's patient seemed to have a profound impact on her. While she never explicitly apologized for her earlier remarks, her demeanor towards Lena during her follow-up appointments was respectful and even somewhat subdued. Mrs. Campbell reported to Lena that Mrs. Ainsworth had begun to engage in some introspection and had even started attending support group meetings to address her underlying anxiety. The story of Lena and Mrs. Ainsworth, though fictionalized, reflects the real-life experiences of many minority professionals who face prejudice and discrimination in their fields. It highlights the importance of speaking out against injustice, the power of solidarity and support, and the potential for unexpected moments of reckoning and even a glimmer of understanding. This narrative also underscores the crucial role that institutions play in fostering a culture of inclusivity and accountability. St. Jude's Hospital's response, while initially hesitant, eventually demonstrated a commitment to addressing the issue of bias and working towards a more equitable environment. The hard karma that Mrs. Ainsworth experienced was not a vengeful act, but rather a natural consequence of her own biases and assumptions. Life has a way of presenting unexpected situations that can challenge our preconceived notions and force us to confront our own prejudices. For Mrs. Ainsworth, needing the medical expertise of the very person she had initially dismissed and disrespected served as a powerful, albeit unintentional lesson. This story is a reminder that our perceptions can be flawed, and that judging individuals based on stereotypes is not only unfair, but also can lead to profound errors in judgment. It calls upon us all to be mindful of our own biases, to challenge prejudice when we see it, and to recognize the inherent worth and dignity of every individual regardless of their appearance or background. A fragile piece had settled over St. Jude's Hospital in the 6 months following Mrs. Ainsworth's departure from the board. The mandatory sensitivity training initially met with sighs and eye rolls from some of the more entrenched staff had slowly begun to bear fruit. Conversations in the cafeteria were more mindful. The subtle but persistent microaggressions that had been a part of the hospital's undercurrent seemed to recede, replaced by a more conscious effort toward inclusivity. For Dr. Lena Hansen, the change was palpable. She could walk the halls without the familiar bracing sense of needing to justify her presence. Her focus returned fully to her work, where she continued to excel. Her success had not gone unnoticed. Dr. Thompson and Mrs. Henderson had jointly nominated her for the newly created position of Director of Cardiac Innovation, a role that would allow her to lead cutting-edge research and mentor a new generation of surgeons. It was the culmination of everything she had worked for a position that would allow her to shape the future of her field. The board meets to finalize the decision next Friday. Dr. Thompson told her over coffee, his eyes crinkling with pride. Honestly, Lena, it's a formality. No other candidate comes close to your qualifications or your vision. You've earned this. Lena felt a warmth spread through her chest, a feeling of genuine belonging that had often eluded her within these walls. Thank you, Michael, she said, her voice thick with emotion. That means more than you know. The tranquility, however, was about to be shattered. The following Tuesday, an emergency page ripped through the calm of Lena's afternoon clinic. It was the cardiac ICU. The patient was Eleanor Ainsworth. She had been readmitted 2 days prior after a syncopal episode. Her atrial fibrillation had become more persistent, and after a consultation with her primary cardiologist, Dr. Miller, she had undergone a catheter ablation procedure. It was a standard, relatively low-risk intervention designed to correct the heart's electrical pathways. The procedure itself had been performed flawlessly by another specialist. But in the early hours of the morning, Mrs. Ainsworth had suffered a TIA, a transient ischemic attack or a mini-stroke. It was a known, albeit uncommon, complication of the procedure, a risk she had been fully briefed on. While her physical symptoms had resolved quickly, the event had left her frightened and disoriented. Lena, as a senior cardiac surgeon, was consulted as part of the team reviewing the case to ensure all protocols were followed. She entered the private ICU room to find a scene of controlled chaos. Dr. Miller was at the bedside, speaking in low, reassuring tones. But standing opposite him, radiating an aura of cold fury, was a man Lena had never seen before. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a bespoke suit that screamed wealth and power, and his face was a mask of aristocratic indignation. This was Charles Ainsworth, Jr., Eleanor's only son. Unacceptable. Charles, Jr. was saying, his voice a low growl that cut through the beeping of the monitors. My mother comes to this hospital for a routine procedure, and she has a stroke. Someone is responsible for this. Mr. Ainsworth, Dr. Miller said patiently, a TIA is a documented risk. Your mother was made fully aware of it. The procedure was a success, but these things can unfortunately happen. Don't speak to me of unfortunate happenings. Dr. Charles Jr. snapped. His eyes, cold and blue, like chips of ice, scanned the room and landed on Lena as she approached. And who is this? More of the so-called top talent at St. Jude's. Lena felt a familiar chill. It was his mother's prejudice distilled and weaponized with a new aggressive strain of arrogance. I'm Dr. Hansen, she said, her voice even. I'm part of the surgical team reviewing your mother's case. Charles Jr. let out a short, incredulous laugh. Dr. Hansen, of course. I've heard all about you. He took a step closer, his presence utterly menacing. You're the one who harassed my mother, the one who humiliated her and had her forced off the board of the hospital our family built. The accusation was so outrageously false, it momentarily stunned Lena into silence. Harassed, humiliated, he had twisted the narrative into a weapon. Mr. Ainsworth, that is a gross mischaracterization of events, Lena stated, regaining her composure. Your mother and I had a misunderstanding, which has long been resolved. My only concern right now is her health. Is it, he sneered, or is this retribution? Did you see her name on the patient list and decide to finish the job? The air was sucked out of the room. Dr. Miller looked horrified. Mr. Ainsworth, that is a despicable and baseless accusation. Dr. Hanson is one of the most respected surgeons in this state. But Charles Jr. was playing a different game, one not bound by facts or professional courtesy. He was there to burn it all down. He turned his back on them, moving to his mother's side. Eleanor Ainsworth lay in the bed, looking small and pale, her eyes darting between her son and Lena, a flicker of fear in their depths. She seemed too weak or too intimidated to speak. The next morning, the first salvo was fired. A prominent right-wing news blog known for its inflammatory rhetoric ran a story with the headline, "Woke Medicine Gone Wrong. Philanthropist Suffers Stroke at Hospital," that purged her for questioning doctor's age. The article, penned by a notorious journalist named Marcus Thorne, was a masterpiece of malicious insinuation. It painted Lena as an affirmative action hire, a militant diversity advocate who used her Harvard degree as a cudgel to silence her elders. It twisted the original incident into an act of aggression by Lena against a frail, concerned benefactress. It then connected this hostile environment to Mrs. Ainsworth's subsequent medical complication, heavily implying either incompetence or, more chillingly, willful neglect on the part of the hospital. The story was a viral sensation. It was picked up by cable news channels and spread across social media like a toxin. Lena's photo was everywhere. Suddenly she wasn't a respected surgeon. She was a caricature, a villain in a culture war narrative. The comment sections were a cesspool of racist and sexist vitriol. The fallout at the hospital was immediate and catastrophic. The phones in the PR department rang off the hook. Mr. Sterling, the administrator, was in a full-blown panic. He called an emergency meeting with Lena, Dr. Thompson, and Mrs. Henderson. His lawyers contacted us this morning, Sterling said, his face ashen. Charles Ainsworth Jr. is preparing a lawsuit for malpractice and elder abuse. He's also demanding your immediate termination, Lena, and a public apology to his mother. That's insane! Dr. Thompson exploded. She wasn't even his mother's primary physician for this procedure. This is a vindictive smear campaign. He's also threatening to pull the Ainsworth Foundation's endowment. Sterling continued, his voice barely a whisper. That's nearly 15% of our operating budget. He'll bankrupt us. Lena felt the walls closing in. The promotion, her reputation, her entire career, all of it was being threatened by a man's inherited malice. She looked at Mr. Sterling and saw the fear in his eyes. His resolve, which had been so carefully constructed months ago, was crumbling under the financial threat. We have to consider our options, Sterling said, avoiding Lena's gaze. A settlement, a leave of absence for you, Lena, until this blows over. Absolutely not, Mrs. Henderson cut in, her voice like steel. We will not capitulate to a bully and a liar. We investigated this matter once before Edward. We know the truth. Are you going to sacrifice one of our best doctors and the integrity of this hospital because a rich man threw a tantrum? But the pressure was immense. The board was divided. Donors were calling spooked by the negative press. Lena's nomination for the directorship was put on indefinite hold. She was asked to take a few days off for her own well-being, a transparent attempt to remove her from the public eye. Walking out of the hospital that day, she felt the stares and whispers that had only recently disappeared return with a vengeance. The progress they had made felt like a fragile sandcastle washed away by a single powerful wave of hate. For 2 days, Lena stayed home feeling a profound sense of despair. Her allies were fighting for her, but it felt like an impossible battle. Dr. Thompson was working tirelessly behind the scenes, gathering statements from every single person involved in Mrs. Ainsworth's care to build a rock-solid medical defense. Mrs. Henderson was rallying the more principled members of the board. But Charles Jr.'s attack wasn't based on facts. It was based on emotion prejudice, and a story that was easier for the public to consume. The key Lena realized was not in the medical charts or the boardroom. The key was Eleanor Ainsworth. It was Mrs. Beatrice Campbell who made the breakthrough. Horrified by what Charles Jr. was doing in her friend's name, she went to the hospital. She found Eleanor in her room, watching the news on a small television, her face a mixture of fear and shame, as a commentator vilified Dr. Hanson. "Eleanor, you must stop this," Beatrice said, her voice gentle but firm. "You know this is wrong. You know what your son is doing is built on a lie." "He's just trying to protect me," Eleanor whispered, her voice frail. "Protect you? He's destroying an innocent woman's life," Beatrice countered. "He's using your past mistakes as a weapon. Is this the legacy you want, for the Ainsworth name to be synonymous with this kind of cruelty and slander?" Beatrice sat with her for over an hour, speaking of legacy of conscience of the woman who had cared for her, despite the ugly words that had passed between them. She reminded Eleanor of the quiet professionalism Lena had shown, the compassion in her eyes when she had been a patient, vulnerable, and afraid. "Dr. Hanson held your life in her hands, Eleanor," Beatrice said softly. "She treated you with dignity and respect, a respect you denied her. How can you sit by and let your son tear her down? The power to stop this lies with you, and you alone." Something in Eleanor seemed to break. The years of defensiveness, of pride, of prejudice crumbled under the weight of her conscience. The tears that welled in her eyes were not for herself, but for the profound injustice being carried out in her name. The board meeting convened on Friday was a grim affair. Charles Ainsworth Jr. was there, flanked by 2 severe-looking lawyers. He was there to deliver his ultimatum in person. He stood before the board, a portrait of righteous fury, and laid out his non-negotiable terms. Dr. Lena Hanson's immediate termination, a multi-million-dollar settlement paid to a charity of his choice, and a full-page public apology printed in the city's major newspaper. "You have until 5 o'clock today," he concluded, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. "Or we will proceed with a lawsuit that will drag the name of St. Jude's through the mud for years to come. Your choice." Mr. Sterling looked defeated. The board members shifted uncomfortably. It seemed inevitable. They would have to sacrifice Lena to save the hospital. Just as Charles Jr. was about to turn and leave, Mrs. Henderson spoke up. "Mr. Ainsworth, before you go there, is one more thing. We have a statement we would like to read." A hospital lawyer stepped forward, holding a single sheet of paper. Charles Jr. scoffed. "I'm not interested in your prepared denials." "It is not from us, sir," the lawyer said calmly. "It is from your mother, Mrs. Eleanor Ainsworth, signed and notarized this morning." A flicker of confusion, then alarm, crossed Charles Jr.'s face. The lawyer began to read. The statement was clear, concise, and devastatingly honest. In it, Eleanor Ainsworth recounted the original incident in the hallway, taking full responsibility for her prejudiced and inappropriate comments. She stated unequivocally that Dr. Hansen had always behaved with the utmost professionalism. She then addressed her recent medical care, affirming that she had been made aware of all risks, and that the care she received from every single staff member at St. Jude's was exemplary and compassionate. The statement concluded with the most powerful words of all. "My son Charles Ainsworth, Jr. is acting without my consent and against my explicit wishes. His campaign against Dr. Hansen and this hospital is based on a distortion of the truth. I am publicly asking him to cease all legal action and media attacks immediately. Dr. Hansen is a credit to her profession and to this hospital. The only apology owed is the one I offer to her now with my deepest and most sincere regret." The silence in the boardroom was absolute. Charles Ainsworth, Jr. stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. He had been publicly disarmed, his entire campaign demolished by the one person he claimed to be protecting. His power, built on a foundation of lies, evaporated in an instant. Without a word, he turned and stormed out of the room, his lawyers scrambling behind him. The next day, the lawsuit was dropped. The news blogs quietly deleted their articles. The firestorm was over. In the aftermath, Lena's nomination for Director of Cardiac Innovation was not just reinstated. It was unanimously and enthusiastically approved by the board. Her grace and resilience under unimaginable pressure had solidified her reputation, not just as a brilliant surgeon, but as a leader of immense character. Eleanor Ainsworth, upon her discharge, requested a private meeting with Lena. The two women sat in Lena's office, the space that had once been a battleground of perception. "I am so sorry, Doctor." Hansen, Eleanor said, her voice clear and steady for the first time. "For everything. I accept your apology, Mrs. Ainsworth." Lena replied, her voice filled not with triumph, but with a quiet sense of peace. The scales of justice had finally and truly found their balance. It wasn't just about a woman being put in her place. It was about a truth, long suppressed, finally coming to light, compelling not only a change in behavior, but a genuine hard-won change of heart. The journey of Dr. Lena Hansen serves as a potent reminder that talent knows no color and that prejudice often blinds us to true potential. Her unwavering professionalism in the face of blatant disrespect, her quiet dignity, and the unexpected twist of fate that placed her detractor in her care offer a powerful narrative about justice, accountability, and the subtle ways in which life can challenge our deepest biases. The story of St. Jude's Hospital reflects the ongoing struggle towards creating truly inclusive spaces where merit and skill are the sole measures of a person's worth. This story, while dramatic, echoes the real-life experiences of countless individuals who face similar hurdles in their professional lives. It underscores the importance of speaking out against injustice, of supporting those who are marginalized, and of holding ourselves and our institutions accountable for fostering equitable environments. What are your thoughts on this powerful story? Have you witnessed or experienced similar situations? Share your comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like this video, share it with your network, and subscribe to our channel for more compelling narratives that explore the complexities of human experience and the ongoing pursuit of a more just and equitable world. Your engagement helps us amplify these important stories and continue the conversation. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss our future content. Thank you for watching.